stepped into the office kitchen to grab my usual morning coffee, but what I saw made my blood freeze. Colin Barrett, my business partner and co-founder of Axis and North Analytics, was hunched over my favorite mug, the blue one I always used. In his hand was a small glass vial, and I watched in horror as he carefully squeezed several drops of clear liquid into my coffee. My heart pounded as I pressed myself against the door frame, staying hidden. Colin stirred the coffee slowly, then placed the vial back in his jacket pocket. He had no idea I was watching. This was 20 minutes before our biggest pitch ever, a $2.4 million contract with Oralis Tech that could change everything for our company. I waited until Colin left the kitchen, whistling casually like nothing had happened. My hands shook as I quickly switched our mugs. His plain white mug now sat where mine had been. Whatever he'd put in that coffee, he was about to drink it himself. The irony wasn't lost on me. Colin always bragged about being the strategic mind of our partnership, but he just made the biggest mistake of his career. As I heard him call out, "Leah, the Zoom room is ready," I grabbed my actual coffee and smiled grimly. This meeting was about to get very interesting. 20 minutes into our presentation, something was clearly wrong with Colin. He'd started strong, introducing our company to the Oralis Tech executives with his usual confidence. But now, beads of sweat dotted his forehead despite the air conditioning running full blast. "So, our analytics platform, Ken." Colin paused, staring blankly at the screen. The CEO of Oralis, Daniel Krell, raised an eyebrow. 3 major venture partners waited patiently, but I could see their interest fading. Colin wiped his forehead and tried again. "The data shows... it shows that." His words came out jumbled, like his tongue wasn't working properly. His usually sharp presentation skills had completely disappeared. I'd been watching this unfold with growing satisfaction, but now I realized I needed to act fast. Our reputation was on the line, and this contract meant everything to both of us, even if Colin had just tried to sabotage me. "What Colin is explaining," I jumped in smoothly, "is how our predictive analytics can increase your operational efficiency by 35%. I clicked to the next slide, taking control of the presentation as Colin gripped the edge of the conference table, looking increasingly disoriented. The Oralis executives immediately turned their attention to me, and I could see relief in their faces. This meeting was far from over. During a brief bathroom break that Colin desperately needed, I quickly pulled out my phone and researched the small bottle I'd glimpsed in his pocket. After some frantic searching, I found it. A scopolamine-based supplement marketed for cognitive enhancement. But the real effects were terrifying. Mild confusion, memory fog, and severe fatigue. My stomach turned as the reality hit me. Colin hadn't just tried to make me look unprofessional. He'd attempted to drug me into appearing completely incompetent in front of the most important clients we'd ever pitched to. This wasn't office politics. This was sabotage of the worst kind. I quickly screenshotted the product information and its side effects, then shoved my phone back in my pocket as Colin stumbled back into the room. His face was pale, and he kept blinking like he couldn't focus properly. "Sorry about that," he mumbled to the Oralis team, trying to regain his composure. "Where were we?" Just then, my phone buzzed with a message that made my heart race. It was from Marcus Chen, Oralis's head of strategy. "Can we speak off record after this presentation? Very interested in your vision." I glanced at Colin, who was struggling to remember where we'd left off in the pitch. He had no idea that his plan had backfired so spectacularly, or that the clients were now more interested in me than ever. While Colin excused himself again, claiming he needed some fresh air, I decided to investigate further. Something told me this sabotage attempt wasn't spontaneous. I walked over to the printer in our conference room and found exactly what I was looking for. A document Colin had forgotten to collect. It was an alternate version of our Oralis presentation, but with one crucial difference. Only Colin's name appeared on the proposal. My name, my contributions, my innovative strategies, all of it had been erased. The cover page read, Barrett Consulting Solutions instead of Axis and North Analytics. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. Every idea I'd developed, every late night I'd spent perfecting our approach, had been rebranded as his solo work. This wasn't just about drugging me during the meeting. Colin had been planning to cut me out entirely and steal our biggest client for his own new company. When Colin returned, looking even more disoriented than before, he slumped into his chair and mumbled under his breath, "I was going to tell you after today anyway." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. He'd just confirmed everything I'd suspected. This partnership, which I'd built with 2 years of my life, was about to be stolen from right under my nose. But Colin had no idea that his confession had just sealed his fate instead of mine. I took a deep breath and dove back into the presentation, determined to show Oralis exactly what they'd be missing if they worked with Colin alone. I launched into the strategic roadmap I'd developed, the one Colin had always dismissed as too ambitious and unrealistic. Our 3-phase implementation strategy, I explained, clicking through detailed charts and projections, will integrate seamlessly with your existing infrastructure while providing real-time insights that your competitors simply don't have access to. The venture partners began leaning forward, asking detailed questions about data security, scalability, and long-term ROI. Every question was directed at me, not Colin. I could see their excitement building as I walked them through the technical specifications and projected outcomes. Colin, still struggling with the effects of his own drugging attempt, tried to contribute. "Yes, and we can also." He reached for his laptop to advance to the next slide, but his coordination was completely off. Instead of clicking the forward arrow, he accidentally hit the wrong key and closed our entire presentation. The screen went black, and an awkward silence filled the room. "No worries," I said calmly, pulling up my backup presentation from my own laptop. "I always keep a second copy ready." Daniel Krell smiled at me with obvious respect. "Excellent preparation, Leah. Please continue." As I seamlessly transitioned to my backup presentation, my phone lit up with a Slack notification from Serena, one of our junior analysts. The message was urgent. "Check your email now." I discreetly glanced at my phone and saw that Serena had forwarded me an email that made my blood boil. It was from Colin to someone named Daniel with the subject line, "Oralis Transition Plan, Confidential." In the email, Colin outlined his plan to spin off the Oralis contract into a new consulting firm called Barrett Solutions. He wrote about how he'd be restructuring the team, and that certain partners would be phased out due to performance concerns. The email was dated 3 days ago. But here's where Colin's arrogance had betrayed him. He'd accidentally CC'd the wrong Serena. Instead of sending it to Serena Williams, his contact at some consulting firm, he'd sent it to Serena Martinez, our own analyst who reported directly to me. I looked across the table at Colin, who was rubbing his temples and trying to focus on my presentation. He had no idea that his entire scheme had just been exposed by his own careless mistake. The irony was almost too perfect. The man who tried to drug me into making errors had just made the biggest error of his professional life. As I continued presenting to the Oralis team, I was already planning my next move. Last week, while I'd been putting finishing touches on our Oralis proposal, Colin had told me he was taking a personal day. I'd thought nothing of it at the time. Now I understood exactly where he'd been. He'd been having a private lunch with Daniel Krell, the CEO of Oralis, without telling me. During that meeting, Colin had planted seeds of doubt about my capabilities. He told Daniel that I would be stepping down soon due to performance issues, and that he'd be taking over full leadership of any Oralis projects. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This entire presentation had been set up as a test. Daniel wasn't just evaluating our company's capabilities. He was specifically testing my leadership based on Colin's lies. That's why, midway through my technical explanation, Daniel suddenly threw me a curveball question about system integrations that wasn't in our original scope of work. "Leah," he said, leaning back in his chair, "how would you handle real-time data synchronization across multiple cloud environments?" It was clearly a test question, designed to see if I could think on my feet or if I'd crumble under pressure like Colin had told him I would. I smiled confidently. "Excellent question, Daniel. Let me walk you through our hybrid approach." As I launched into a detailed technical explanation, I could see Daniel's expression shift from skepticism to genuine impressed surprise. I dove deep into the system integration question. explaining our proprietary approach to real-time data synchronization. We use a combination of event-driven architecture and distributed caching, I continued, which allows us to maintain data consistency across multiple cloud environments while reducing latency by up to 60%. Daniel nodded approvingly, making notes on his tablet. That's significantly more sophisticated than what we discussed last week, he said, glancing meaningfully at Colin. Colin looked panicked, realizing that his lies about my incompetence were being exposed. Leah, what are you doing? He whispered urgently, but loud enough for the Auralis team to hear. I'm answering their questions professionally, I replied calmly, not breaking eye contact with Daniel. Isn't that what we're here for? The other venture partners began asking follow-up questions about implementation timelines, security protocols, and cost projections. With each answer I gave, it became clearer that I was the technical expert they needed, not Colin. This level of insight is exactly what our CTO has been asking for, said Maria Santos, one of the venture partners. We've been struggling with data silos for months. Colin tried to interject, we can definitely handle that integration. But his words came out slurred and confused. The contrast between my sharp technical responses and his drug-induced fog couldn't have been more obvious. Daniel looked directly at me. Leah, I think we need to have a more detailed conversation about this project. As soon as our meeting with Auralis ended, I excused myself and immediately called Madison Leary, my business lawyer. My hands were still shaking from adrenaline as I explained everything. The drugged coffee, the secret meetings, the stolen presentation. Colin tried to sabotage me with some kind of drug, I told Madison, pacing around our empty conference room. And I have proof that he's been planning to steal our biggest client. Madison's response was swift and decisive. Send me everything you have, photos, emails, whatever evidence you've collected. But first, let me pull up your partnership agreement. I heard her typing rapidly on the other end of the line. After a few minutes, she found what she was looking for. Leah, according to the documents you both signed, you own 51% of all intellectual property developed at Axis and North. That includes client relationships, proprietary methods, and strategic frameworks. My heart raced. What does that mean? It means Colin can't just walk away with your clients or your work. Madison explained. The partnership agreement is ironclad. You have controlling interest in everything you've built together. There was a pause before she asked the question I'd been hoping for. Do you want to make this official? Because with the evidence you have, we can remove him from the company entirely. I looked through the glass walls of our conference room at Colin, who was slumped over his desk, still dealing with the effects of his own sabotage attempt. Yes, I said firmly. Let's do it. While Colin was passed out at his desk, I decided to gather more evidence. I walked into his private office, my heart pounding with each step. If he woke up and caught me, it would be awkward to explain. But I needed to know exactly how deep his betrayal went. On his desk, partially hidden under some financial reports, I found a manila folder labeled Vanguard Rebrand. Inside were documents that made my stomach turn. Colin had created an entire timeline for pushing me out of the company, complete with forged performance metrics that painted me as incompetent and unreliable. There were fake client feedback forms claiming I'd missed deadlines that I knew I'd met, false financial projections showing that my strategies had cost the company money when the opposite was true. Even fabricated emails from team members expressing concerns about my leadership. The level of planning was shocking. This wasn't a spontaneous decision to drug my coffee. This was a months-long campaign to destroy my reputation and steal everything I'd worked for. I quickly photographed every page with my phone, making sure to capture the dates and Colin's handwritten notes. Then, I immediately emailed everything to Madison with the subject line, "Additional evidence, urgent." As I carefully placed the folder back where I'd found it, Colin stirred at his desk. I quickly slipped out of his office and returned to my own workspace, my heart hammering. The evidence was overwhelming, and Colin had no idea that his own documentation had just sealed his fate. An hour after our Auralis presentation, I received an email that changed everything. It was from Maya Calhoun, the third venture partner who'd been quietly observing our meeting. "Leah, could we meet privately?" I have some concerns about your business partner. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown, away from the office. Maya arrived first, and her expression was serious as I sat down across from her. I need to be completely honest with you, Maya said, stirring her latte. Colin reached out to me last month about a potential CEO transition at your company. He suggested that after we funded the Auralis project, you'd be stepping down and he'd be taking full control. My blood ran cold. He told you I was stepping down? He said you were having performance issues, and that the transition would be better for everyone involved. But after today's presentation, it's obvious that he was lying. Maya leaned forward. Leah, you're clearly the technical expert and the strategic mind behind this company. Colin couldn't even maintain focus during a crucial client meeting. I told Maya about the coffee incident and the forged documents I'd discovered. Her face grew dark with anger. This is completely unacceptable, she said firmly. Maya Ventures has a zero-tolerance policy for this kind of behavior. If you want to make a move against Colin, we'll back you financially and legally. The relief I felt was overwhelming. Not only did I have evidence of Colin's betrayal, but now I had powerful allies who could help me fight back. The next morning, I implemented the first phase of my plan. I logged into our company's shared cloud drive and restricted Colin's access to all critical files and client information. It was well within my rights as the majority owner of our intellectual property. When Colin arrived at the office and tried to access our systems, he immediately realized what had happened. He stormed into my office, his face red with anger. "What the hell did you do to my access?" he demanded, standing over my desk. I looked up at him calmly. "Your access has been revoked, pending a review of recent activities." "You can't do that. I'm a co-founder of this company." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a letter Madison had prepared. "Actually, I can. This letter explains your current status and the reasons for the access restriction." Colin grabbed the letter and read it quickly. His face went pale as he realized the document outlined evidence of his sabotage attempts and breach of fiduciary duty. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "You can't prove any of this. I'll sue you for everything you're worth." I smiled slightly. "I encourage you to speak with your lawyer about that. Mine seems to think I have an excellent case." Colin crumpled the letter and threw it on my desk. "You have no idea what you're starting, Leah." But I did know exactly what I was starting, and I was ready for whatever came next. That afternoon, I called a private meeting with our 3 junior analysts, Serena Martinez, Jake Thompson, and Amy Chen. I'd always suspected they knew more about Colin's behavior than they let on, and I was right. "I need to know the truth about what's been happening here," I told them as we gathered in a small conference room. "No consequences, no judgment. I just need honesty." Serena spoke first. "Colin's been taking credit for your work for months, Leah. Remember that client retention strategy that saved the Morrison account? He told everyone it was his idea." Jake nodded. "And the predictive model for the healthcare sector? He presented it to the board like he'd developed it himself." Amy was the most hesitant to speak, but finally opened up. "Last week, he called you a replaceable tool during a team meeting you missed. He said the company would be better off without your overthinking and perfectionism." My heart sank, but I wasn't surprised. "Would you be willing to put any of this in writing?" All 3 nodded immediately. "We've been keeping notes," Serena said. "We knew something like this might happen eventually." They spent the next hour documenting specific incidents, dates, and witnesses. By the end of our meeting, I had written statements from 3 employees detailing months of credit theft, manipulation, and inappropriate comments about my capabilities. "Thank you for being honest," I told them. "This company is going to be different moving forward." The relief on their faces told me everything I needed to know about the toxic environment Colin had been creating. That evening, my phone rang. It was Daniel Krell from Auralis Tech. "Leah, I need to ask you directly about something," Daniel said, his tone serious. "Colin called me this afternoon claiming that you're being difficult and trying to sabotage your partnership, but after today's presentation, I have serious doubts about his version of events." I took a deep breath. "Daniel, I think you deserve to know the truth about what happened during our meeting." I sent him everything. The video I'd secretly recorded of Colin drugging my coffee, the forged documents, the emails about stealing the Oralis contract, and the written statements from my employees. There was a long silence after I finished explaining. Finally, Daniel spoke. Leah, this is one of the most disturbing things I've ever encountered in a business relationship. Attempting to drug a business partner is not just unethical, it's criminal. I understand if you want to reconsider working with our company, I said quietly. Actually, I want to reconsider working with Colin, Daniel replied firmly. Based on what you've shown me, I'll be recommending that Oralis pulls him from any involvement in our project. We want to work with you directly. The weight that lifted from my shoulders was incredible. Not only had I exposed Colin's betrayal, but I'd also secured the most important client relationship in our company's history. Thank you for trusting me with the truth, Daniel said before hanging up. We'll be in touch soon about moving forward. The next day, I called an emergency board meeting for Axis and North Analytics. Our board consisted of 5 members, myself, Colin, and 3 external advisors who'd invested in our company. I'd prepared a comprehensive presentation documenting 11 separate breaches of ethical conduct by Colin. The evidence was overwhelming. The drugging attempt, the forged performance reviews, the stolen intellectual property, the secret client meetings, and the documented pattern of credit theft. This is a witch hunt, Colin protested when I finished my presentation. Leah is trying to push me out because she's jealous of my client relationships. Board member Patricia Williams, a veteran executive, studied the evidence carefully. Colin, this documentation shows a clear pattern of deceptive behavior. The video evidence alone is extremely concerning. How do we even know that video is real? Colin demanded. We had it analyzed by a digital forensics expert, I replied, sliding a report across the table. It's been verified as authentic and unaltered. The other board members, Robert Chang and Michael Torres, exchanged worried glances. Robert spoke first. Colin, these allegations are serious. Do you have any evidence to refute them? Colin's face was red with anger, but he had nothing to offer except denials. After 2 hours of discussion, the board voted unanimously to suspend Colin pending a full investigation. Your access to all company resources is revoked effective immediately, Patricia announced. You have 48 hours to respond to these allegations in writing. Colin stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. This isn't over, Leah. But we all knew it was. 2 days later, Colin requested a private meeting with me. He looked defeated as he sat across from my desk, a stark contrast to his usual arrogant demeanor. I want to make a deal, he said quietly. I'll walk away from the company voluntarily if you give me a reasonable severance package. No lawyers, no public drama. I studied his face. You tried to drug me, Colin. You forged documents to destroy my reputation. You attempted to steal our biggest client, and now you want me to pay you to leave quietly? It doesn't have to be a big payout, he said desperately. Just enough to help me transition to something new. I leaned back in my chair. You tried to poison my career and steal everything I've worked for. You don't get to buy your way out of the consequences. Colin's expression hardened. You're making a mistake, Leah. I have connections in this industry. I can make things very difficult for you. Feel free to try, I replied calmly. But I should mention that Madison has already filed a formal complaint with the State Bar Association about your behavior, and Daniel Krell is considering whether to report the drugging incident to law enforcement. The color drained from Colin's face. He stood up without another word and walked toward the door. Just as he was leaving, Tara, his executive assistant, quietly walked past, carrying a box of her personal belongings. She gave me a meaningful look that said everything. With Colin officially suspended, I made the decision to rebrand our company entirely. Axis and North Analytics was too closely associated with his reputation, and I wanted a fresh start that reflected my values. I announced the launch of Monroe Insight Partners to our staff and clients. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Many people admitted they'd always seen me as the real driving force behind our success. Daniel Krell called me personally to congratulate me on the rebrand, and Oralis Tech officially signed the $2.4 million contract directly with Monroe Insight Partners. We're excited to be your first major client under the new brand. Daniel told me during our contract signing ceremony. Meanwhile, Colin filed an injunction claiming that I'd stolen his company. But with all the evidence I'd gathered, the injunction was dismissed within a week. The judge's ruling was satisfying. The evidence clearly shows that Mr. Barrett engaged in fraudulent behavior designed to steal intellectual property that rightfully belonged to Ms. Monroe. A week after the rebrand, an industry blog published a hit piece about my company that was clearly sourced by Colin. The article painted me as a difficult partner who had forced out a respected co-founder. The piece hurt, especially because many of our potential clients read that platform. But I'd prepared for this possibility. I released a comprehensive response that included the unedited recording of our Oralis meeting, the video of Colin drugging my coffee, and statements from employees. "The truth speaks for itself," I wrote. "I encourage anyone interested in the facts to review the documented evidence." The reaction was swift and overwhelming. Within hours, the story had gone viral on LinkedIn. Industry leaders began sharing my response with comments like, "This is why we need more transparency in business." The original blog was forced to issue a retraction and apology. Public opinion had swung completely in my favor, and Colin's reputation in the industry was effectively destroyed. A month later, my finance team discovered something that made my blood boil. During their audit of our old company accounts, they found evidence that Colin had been systematically siphoning marketing funds into a personal account. "It looks like he's been doing this for almost 8 months, explained Sarah, our new CFO. "Small amounts each time, but it adds up to nearly $30,000. The pattern was clear and deliberate. Colin had been using fake vendor invoices to redirect company money into an account he controlled. "This is criminal fraud," Madison told me when I forwarded the evidence. "We need to report this to the authorities immediately." I felt sick thinking about all the times Colin had complained about our tight budget while secretly stealing from us. We filed a formal complaint with the district attorney's office. The investigation was launched within days. "This gives us even more leverage," Madison explained. "Financial fraud is a felony." Just as the criminal investigation was beginning, I received an unexpected call from Tara, Colin's former assistant. She sounded nervous but determined. "Leah, I need to clear the air about some things," she said. "I've been subpoenaed to testify about Colin's activities. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown." Tara looked relieved to finally speak freely. "I knew about the financial irregularities," she admitted. "Colin had me process those fake invoices. I kept copies because I was worried I'd get blamed." She pulled out a thick folder filled with documents. Purchase orders for services that were never provided, expense reports for conferences he never attended. I have it all. The prosecutor's office had offered Tara immunity in exchange for her testimony, and she was eager to cooperate. "Thank you for coming forward," I told her. "It takes courage to do the right thing." Madison was thrilled when I called her. With Tara's testimony, Colin's going to have a very difficult time avoiding serious consequences. The legal pressure finally became too much for Colin. Through his attorney, he reached out to propose a settlement that would avoid a lengthy court battle and potential jail time. The terms were exactly what I'd wanted. Colin would sign a comprehensive exit agreement, relinquishing all claims to Monroe Insight Partners, and agree to a 3-year non-compete clause. He's also agreed to pay full restitution for the stolen funds, Madison explained, plus damages for the business disruption he caused. The settlement amount was substantial, enough to cover the stolen money, legal fees, and compensation for lost business. But more importantly, it gave me complete control over the company I'd built. When Colin signed the papers, he looked broken. The confident, manipulative man who'd tried to drug me was gone. "I hope it was worth it," I said quietly as he prepared to leave. He didn't answer. As I watched him walk out of the conference room for the last time, I felt a sense of closure I'd been waiting months to experience. Word of Colin's downfall spread quickly through our industry, and the response was overwhelming. Former colleagues began reaching out to apologize for not speaking up sooner about his behavior. Several talented professionals asked about joining Monroe Insight Partners, but I was selective. I only wanted people who had demonstrated integrity and loyalty during the difficult period. Serena, Jake and Amy were the first to receive promotions and raises. They'd stood by me when it would have been easier to stay silent. The most exciting development came through Oralis Tech's referral network. A major healthcare company approached us with a $1.7 million consulting contract. Daniel Krell spoke very highly of your work, their CTO explained. He said you're exactly the kind of strategic partner we need. Monroe Insight Partners was growing faster than I'd ever imagined possible. We were building a culture based on respect, honesty, and shared success, everything that had been missing under Colin's influence. 6 months after launching Monroe Insight Partners, I was invited to give the keynote address at the National Tech Ethics Summit. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of industry leaders, I felt a sense of pride I'd never experienced before. My former biz partner once tried to sabotage me before a career-defining presentation I began, and the audience leaned forward with interest. I told my story: the drugged coffee, the stolen intellectual property, the systematic fraud, and the ultimate vindication. But I focused on the lessons rather than the drama. When someone tries to destroy your reputation through deception, I said, the most powerful response is documented truth. Keep records, gather evidence, and never let fear prevent you from fighting for what's right. The speech resonated deeply with the audience. When I finished speaking, the entire auditorium erupted in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. The little girl who'd once been intimidated by office politics had become a voice for integrity in business. A year later, I received a final piece of news about Colin that brought satisfying closure to the entire ordeal. 3 different consulting associations had barred him from membership based on the ethical violations documented in our case. The irony was perfect. I hadn't lifted a finger to pursue these additional consequences. The industry had simply reviewed the evidence and made its own judgment about Colin's fitness to practice. Colin would never be able to rebuild his career in our field. Every potential client would find the documented evidence of his behavior through a simple Google search. That same day, I found a final message from Colin in my email spam folder. "You'll regret this, Leah." I stared at those words for a moment, then permanently deleted the message without responding. He still didn't understand that his downfall had been entirely of his own making. I'd simply refused to be a victim of his schemes, and that refusal had led to justice being served. This morning, I sit in my corner office overlooking downtown, watching the sunrise paint the city in golden light. Monroe Insight Partners has grown to 23 employees, and we're on track to hit 8 figures in revenue this year. On my desk sits a coffee mug that my team gave me last Christmas. It's simple and white, with just 5 words printed in bold letters: built, not betrayed. Every morning when I pour my coffee, I remember where this journey started, with Colin's desperate attempt to sabotage me before the most important meeting of my career. He thought he could drug my coffee and steal my future. Instead, he accidentally drugged himself and revealed his true character. The Oralis contract that started it all has led to 12 more major clients and a reputation as one of the most ethical firms in our industry. I take a sip of my coffee and smile. It tastes like victory, like justice, and like the sweet satisfaction of building something real through honest work. This time, I know exactly what's in my cup: pure, untainted success. And I know exactly what I'm worth: everything I've earned through talent, hard work, and the courage to fight for what's right.